Hello and welcome back for the August update on the Universal UK project. Now, I've held off again, I always do every month until there's kind of something important worth talking about. I don't want to waste your time. And sadly, the news that's worth talking about this month isn't entirely positive. It's not super reassuring that this project is going to go ahead. I'm not saying it's cancelled or anything like that. I don't want to be like too clickbaity or trying to kind of worry you too much. But there is a cause for concern, maybe just a little one. There's also some good news, so let's start with that. The first bit of good news is that Lisa Nandy, who's now the Culture and Tourism Secretary, she's written a letter to Comcast, who's the parent company of Universal, just reaffirming the government's support of the project. Now, this was expected, this wasn't a big deal, but it is kind of a step in the right direction. It's better than the opposite. So for anyone who can't remember why this is important, we've just had an election in the UK and the government changed from the Conservatives to Labour. The previous Labour MP who was in charge of this kind of thing in a shadow capacity, so he was in charge of tourism and culture, he lost his seat in the election, which meant he was kind of the Labour contact that Universal had been working with. He lost his seat, he lost his job. Lisa Nandy took over, but she's now kind of reaffirmed, yep, on the same wavelength, and that she was going to be meeting with people from Comcast in the near future. So that's all super positive that although the election, could have potentially thrown a spanner in the works for this whole project, looks like that's not happening. This letter kind of just makes it clear, yep, the government is still fully behind this project. We also had some kind of positive news from the Coaster Force forums. I read this. There was someone called Stephen X that wrote a post there saying that tenders are starting to be released for the site. So this is when the council or even individual businesses can put out tenders saying, hey, this is something that we want done. In this case, it's probably site work, so things like site clearance, ground clearance, maybe bits of surveying and things like that. And they put them out to see if any local businesses want to bid on them to say, hey, yeah, we could do this. This is how much we'd be able to do it for. This is obviously a positive step. As Stephen X on Coaster Force points out, it's not entirely kind of confirmation that the project's definitely going ahead. You might think, kind of like I did when I first looked at it, oh, Universal are paying money to get the site prepared. They're definitely going ahead with this. Apparently this was also done for the London Resort project, which obviously didn't go ahead, and lots of us think probably was never planned to go ahead. It was a bit of an investment scam. So while this is a positive step, Universal are putting up money to try and do things to the site, do things to the land that they own. It's still, this is still before planning permission, and it's still before Comcast have said, yes, we're definitely going ahead with the project. So this isn't confirmation. It's just another positive step that you would expect to see if this was going ahead. But let's talk about the bad news, shall we? So, the Financial Times did an article, and I'm not going to be sharing stuff from the Financial Times article because it's from behind a paywall. So everything I'm sharing is from Blue Loop, who reported on the Financial Times article. But anyway, Financial Times spoke to people at Comcast, and apparently what's been going on is right now, Comcast are speaking to the government about what sort of incentives they can offer them to go ahead with the project. So I think what's happening is basically Comcast obviously wanted to go ahead with this project. The government have been incredibly positive about it and saying, yep, it's a special project. The councils are all super supportive of it. So now Comcast are kind of stepping back a bit and saying, oh, okay, well, you really want this to happen. What are you going to offer us? So this will be in terms of things like tax incentives, maybe saying, okay, we won't charge you as much corporation tax, or we won't charge you as much, land tax or something like that. Or we won't charge you tax on some of the money that you're going to be spending to improve the infrastructure, things like that. Or it might be subsidies. So saying, okay, for the first 10 years that this is running, we are going to subsidize some staff wages to help, with the environmental side of things, or we're going to subsidize the energy bills or something like that. That's the sort of thing that the government could offer the business, and Comcast have said, yeah, we want to see what you're going to offer us. And the worrying part of this is that they've then gone on to say, and we're going to look at other sites in Europe if the incentives aren't good enough. Now, obviously, this could just be negotiation. This could just be how big businesses do things. They've seen that they're in a very strong position, so now they're playing a bit hardball with the government saying, okay, we now want you to give us the best possible deal to convince us to go ahead with this. So maybe Comcast have decided, yep, they do want to go ahead with this, but they want to pretend that they're a bit more on the fence about it, because then that puts them in a better negotiating position that if the government doesn't want to lose this, multi-billion-pound project, then they need to offer lots of incentives. So I'm not seeing this as too much bad news. I'm not seeing this as anything too dramatic, but it's obviously a stumbling block that if this doesn't go well, if the government doesn't want to offer things, maybe the new Labour government will want to kind of play hardball, and they'll be like, yeah, we don't want to sort of bow down to these big American corporations, so we're not going to offer them any incentives. Then I could imagine Comcast saying, okay, we'll go somewhere else. We'll just not do this. So that would suck. So hopefully this is all going to go well. Hopefully it's all going to be negotiated and it'll all be fine. And hopefully we'll hear about that soon. Now, on to the final piece of bad news about this. The Financial Times also reports that a decision on the whole project as to whether Comcast is going to go ahead with it and put in planning permission is now expected by the end of the year. So we're already kind of towards the end of August now. So we've got about, 4 months left of the year, before the end of the year, before the end of 2024. I assume they mean the calendar year, not the financial year, which will go on till April. I'm assuming that they mean till the end of December, really. That's when we're now going to be waiting to hear about whether this project is going to go ahead. And that sets everything back a bit, because I know at the meetings that they had in Bedford, when they had those meetings with the public, some people were reporting that they had been told an internal decision was going to be made in like June or July. Obviously, we're past that now. And I thought, okay, if an internal decision was going to be made then, we might expect to start seeing planning permission and things like that by the end of the year. Now, if they're not saying they're going to make an internal decision until the end of the year, we might not be seeing planning permission until next year, which might delay the whole thing even further. So it's all moving a little bit more slowly than I was hoping for this summer, but there's nothing that's saying it's definitely not happening. There's just also nothing saying it definitely is happening. I would say I was thinking it was about 90% likely to go ahead a couple of months ago, and now I'm probably at, okay, it's probably more like 70% likely to go ahead. I've got a few more concerns than I did before, but we'll see how it goes. Obviously, as soon as we hear something, I'll make another update video and let all of you know. Make sure you've also subscribed and turn your notifications on. There's going to be a bit more content, obviously, over the next few weeks. I'm going to be doing something about all the news that came out of D23 about the Disney expansions for the different parks around the world. There's a lot of news about what might be happening in Florida, but there's also stuff that applies to Disneyland and the Disney parks in Asia as well. So that's pretty exciting. Make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.